Welcome to Gone Fishin'. Today, your hosts T.J. Schwanke and Bob Kirkpatrick do some summertime perch fishing.
What we got here?
Oh, nice perch. Yeah. That's what we're after.
Yes. Hi, welcome to Gone Fishin'. On today's show, we're going to be fishing for perch and walleye at Lac Pelletier for about 30 miles south of Swift Current. We're going to be using slip bobbers, a little used technique, and we're going to hope to show you some tricks that will help you with your fishing. So stay tuned for some great action.
We found out why our perch aren't in here. Catching pike after pike, and I'm sure that's why the perch aren't in here like we hoped they would be. And that doesn't look like a perch either.
Doesn't feel much like one.
And now it's going to rain on us. I had an idea. Why don't you throw him in the live well? I think that might be the same one that's got...
There's your line in him.
My line is in there?
Yep.
It's the same pike that's got the last 3 leeches, so let's throw him in the live well for a while, and when we're ready to leave, we'll let him go again. Put him in the back well. I broke a hook off in him earlier, and you can still see it in his mouth, so it hasn't...
Actually, you broke 2 off in him, didn't you?
It is the same one, all 3 hooks in its mouth, so it hasn't stopped him from feeding at all. Now, he knows a good thing, too. Those leeches are pretty tasty. Don't believe it. A whole set of hardware in his mouth.
They are. Stay back here for a while.
Now maybe we can get some perch action going again. Fill up the slack.
Oh, could be a perch.
It's a good one if it is. We know one thing.
Not that same
Not
pike
that
again.
same pike. Oh, nice big perch. Oh,
Big.
this isn't very wise either. He's in.
What we did, and I think maybe helped here a little bit, is we caught that same pike 3 times, and what he was in here doing was feeding on the perch.
And our leeches.
And our leeches. He had him pretty stirred up, so what we've done is we've just taken him out of the lake, put him in the live well, and we'll put him back when we're ready to leave. And I think we'll give these perch a chance to feed now. And obviously it worked. It didn't take more than 5 minutes.
That is a nice big perch.
These are some nice big raindrops that are falling.
Now that's what we're here for. We'll catch a bunch of those, we'll have a good meal tonight, TJ.
Yeah. Quite often when you get a drastic light change like this, a big dark cloud moves in, evening sets in, something like that, the walleye will start to feed quite heavily. Walleye's eyes are quite adaptable to the changing light conditions. Their eyes are much more adaptable to changing light conditions than bait fish such as these perch. So the perch become disoriented for a few minutes until their eyes can adapt to the light change. So the walleye take full advantage of that feeding frenzy. And quite often you do get that light change, the fishing will turn on unbelievably.
Might only last for 5 or 10 minutes. As soon as the clouds move away, they can be really hot. We had a little shower come through here a couple minutes ago, and looks like, I hope it clears off. We still got quite a few hours of daylight left. Maybe those perch will still turn on good.
Okay, this feels like a good one, Bob.
So I just had a little one get off on me here.
I just changed to a piece of night crawler here. Oh, it's a little walleye.
Boy, they're in here. As soon as you get the bobber down to the bottom, as soon as you get your bait down to the bottom, it's going down. There must be all kinds of little perch down here.
Looks like this poor walleye had a run-in with a pike here.
Oh yeah, you ever?
Quite often you'll get these fish that'll be all scarred up like this, and fish have an amazing capacity to heal. So that doesn't look like it bothered him at all. He got away lucky, and he'll probably grow up to be a big fish one day.
Oh, there I'm down again. As soon as you get the hook down there, a little bit bigger, but not much. Lots of perch this size. I know there is a lot of big ones in here too. Nice release,
Guess he wanted to go back.
They sure go after this though. It's a good idea to have a set of forceps along, something small, get in the fish's mouth. Now if they're hooked down deep in the gullet, you're better off just to clip your line and let the fish go with the hook in its mouth. That one was just stuck in a little deeper than I could reach with my fingers. It goes back to the bottom in a hurry. Yeah, they must be stacked down in here. As soon as you get the bait down to the bottom, we're pulling the bobber under. We're fishing in about 12 or 13 feet of water. Got the bait set about 6 inches off the bottom. Smoke 'em. Now, my leech is wore out. You caught 3 fish. Ah, boy, that's another nice one.
Yeah.
Sure seem to be stacked up right in this one small spot, don't they?
Oh, you bet. Slip bobbers are such a good way to sit on top of fish. We're anchored just off the edge of them, which is something important to do. You don't want to anchor right on top of the fish. You'll end up spooking them off. So we've anchored just off the edge of them, and we're casting out, and we're leaving our bait sit on top of them. And they were a little inactive earlier, and now they're really going. So I think just by leaving that bait sit on top of them long enough was the key.
Well, we're anchored in about 16 and a half feet of water, and the fish seem to be right around that 12-foot mark. And I know we tried a little deeper, a little shallower, and they seem to be right at that 12-foot edge. So we've got our baits up about within a foot of the bottom, and they're starting to feed now.
This one's a little more lively. White tip on its tail too.
Oh, nice. Why? Well, you never know what you're going to catch here. I just got bit off by a pike. After just pulling in a nice perch.
One thing with these walleye, you just take and hold them by the belly like that. It really makes them calm, and they'll just sit there. Rather than trying to grab them over the top and getting dorsal fins stuck into your hand, just grab them by the bottom like that. They'll sit there nice and comfortably. Do what you have to do and get them back in the water.
And we're catching lots of small perch like this. And that's fun when you got the kids out. They enjoy catching fish, any kind of fish. They get bored sometimes when you don't catch any fish at all, and even small fish like this are fun to catch. They have a riot. And you always get the chance of getting a bigger one, but can't get hung up on always catching big fish.
Bigger one like this, Bob?
That's a little bit better.
Now this is great. We're down at Lac Pelletier here, just south of Swift Current. This is an unbelievable place if you want to bring the family out. It's nice and close. There's good paved roads all the way down here. It's a small lake. You know, it's been quite windy out here today, and it's nice and calm, so you don't have to worry about getting caught in waves. And the fishing is unreal. So we're catching a lot of smaller fish, but we're catching some nice ones. We're going to have some shore lunch later, and this is great.
And the fishing action's hot. As fast as you can get your bait down to the bottom, there's another one on. You don't know if it's a perch or a walleye or a pike. There, I got another one on here. Another small perch. Boy, they're aggressive this morning.
You know, a lot of people kind of get disillusioned with fishing after a few years. They get so hung up on catching that big elusive fish. And it's not going to happen that often. And I mean, we spend a couple hundred days a year on the water. And I get as much fun out of doing this as I would catching, 20-pound pike anywhere. I just love fishing, and it doesn't matter where it is or what kind of fish I'm after.
Quite often you'll hear the term catch and release. Now, The tournaments that TJ and I fish are catch and release. Every fish gets turned back into the lake. In fact, we refuse to fish any tournaments that aren't catch and release. But it's left a bad taste in some people's mouths, the term catch and release. I mean, these fish are great eating, and there's nothing wrong, like TJ said, with eating some of the smaller fish. So we're using the term selective harvest now, and a lot of people seem to be able to accept that a lot better. And it's when we used to talk about catch and release, that's the same. We meant the same thing as selective harvest, but I don't know. A lot of people just had trouble adapting to that. So selective harvest makes a lot more sense to them.
On this week's show, the Gone Fishing team traveled to the Lac Pelletier in southern Saskatchewan. Lac Pelletier is a short 30-minute drive south of Swift Current, just off Highway number 4. The lake boasts excellent access for the boating angler as well as camping at the regional park. There are also a number of permanent cottages dotting the shore of this prairie oasis. A fairly small lake by prairie standards, Pelletier is well protected from the wind. Anglers, even in the smallest boats, can usually find a calm spot where the fish are biting. Northern pike, perch, and walleye are plentiful, making this the ideal family fishing destination. Kids especially enjoy the fast action and variety Pelletier has to offer. The smiles just don't get any bigger than that. Anglers are encouraged to practice a selective harvest by releasing the bigger fish and keeping only enough fillets for an evening meal. While fish are plentiful, heavy angling pressure can quickly decimate a lake of this size. We must conserve our fisheries for the next generation. Stay tuned as Bob and TJ share some more slip bobber techniques.
Ah, there we go.
Looks a little better.
Walleye. Well, TJ, it's getting dark. We've caught a lot of walleye and a lot of nice perch. One of the best parts is yet to come, though. We got to go for that fish fry.
I'm waiting for it.
So, why don't we throw this one in the well? This will make sure there's enough for everybody. Let's go clean these fish and get eating.
Sounds good.
Well, you've got that mastered anyway, George. I've watched you do a lot of fish. We're here with George and Ross Williamson, and Ross's son Curtis. Now, Ross and Curtis were kind enough to supply the camera boat today, and George has invited us all over for a fish feed. We're here at Lac Pelletier, and George lives out here on the lake in the summertime and spends his winters in the nice warm south, so he gets a lot of practice cleaning fish. Well, this is as good as any of the best guide service I've ever had at any camp. And I know we're going to get a great meal, too.
Not much left on the fish, I'll guarantee you.
Anyway, George, we're sure looking forward to this fish fry. I know I've had meals here before during hunting trips and fishing trips and never gone away hungry, that's for sure.
It's time now for Pokey's Pro Tips.
Now, the technique we were using out there today were slip bobbers. And a lot of people have no idea how to fish slip bobbers, or maybe they've never seen them. So I'm just going to show you simply how to rig it up and then how to fish it a little bit. So basically what you start with is just the main line off your rod. And what we're going to do first is put what's called a bobber stop on. Now what this little rubber stop does is it controls your depth. Now we just simply slide the line through the wire loop and just about pull it on. And then it's important to wet your line. And what that does is stop the friction. If you don't do that, sometimes you can tear these little stops. So simply that stop's on there. Now by moving that stop up and down the line, we can control the depth we're going to be fishing. Now what I do is put a bead on next. And what that does is come up against the top of the bobber. And if you don't do that, sometimes that little rubber stop will actually jam in the top of the bobber. So this just stops that. That's the only reason for it. And we take our slip bobber. And the thing about the slip bobber is the line slides straight through the middle of them. And that's what allows us to fish any depth we want. There's no fixed line that's below it. So we just simply slide the line through the middle of the slip bobber. Like that. And now what I do is tie a barrel swivel beneath this. And this is a really good trick, especially if you're fishing from shore. So what happens if your hook or your weight snags up, you can just simply break it off if you tie it on with a lighter line, and you still get your bobber back. And you don't have to be wasting those. So we just tie that on with an improved clinch knot. And again, wet that knot before you tighten it. Anytime you tie a knot, it's a good idea to wet it just before you slide it tight, and that'll stop the friction. Now what I'm going to do, I've got 10-pound test on my main line here, which is much too heavy for the fish we're going to be fishing for today. So I've just got some snells tied here on some 6-pound ultra thin, which is actually the same diameter as 4-pound test, which would be just perfect for these perch and walleye. So I'm just going to tie one of these snells on below. And again, we just tie it to the other end of the barrel swivel with an improved clinch knot as well. Give it about 5 wraps. And wet it also. So now there's the basic setup. Now we have to get some weight on this, and the amount of weight we use is determined basically by the size of the bobber we're using. We want this bobber so it's just barely sticking out of the water. And the reason for that is when the fish pulls on it, he'll feel very little resistance, and it's quite easy to detect a strike. So I'm just going to use some split shot. And we start with our heaviest split shot at the top, and we progressively work down the line with smaller sizes. And the reasoning for this is it allows the leech to swim quite freely, and I leave about a foot or so below the last split shot in the hook. And what that does is allow that leech to swim quite freely with no obstructions. This is a really natural presentation. So I've got my split shot staggered down the line, and I know that's the right amount of split shot for this slip bobber just because I've used them quite a bit. And if you haven't, just keep experimenting until that bobber sits right in the water. So that's the basic setup. And we were using leeches and crawlers today, and I'll show you exactly how to hook up a leech. You just take a leech. Now on the leeches, there's a sucker end, and that's actually the tail end. Everyone thinks that's the head, but it's actually the tail. So we hook it right through that sucker. Now what happens when that leech gets in the water, he'll try and swim away from that hook. And this is actually the head end down here. So he's going to swim away, he's going to swim around in circles, and he can swim around quite naturally. So to determine our depth with these bobbers now, the one nice thing about them, these bobbers will sit flat on the water like this until there's some weight on them. So if you cast your bobber out and it keeps sitting like this and never pops upright, you know you've got slack below and you have too much line. So take and just slide that stop down a little bit until that bobber pops upright. And then you know you've got the right amount of line out below it. So that's basically all there is to rigging up a slip bobber. Now we've got a couple tricks for tying up your own stops as well if you don't want to use these rubber stops, and Bob's going to show you how to do that.
Now there's a variety of different slip bobbers and different styles and shapes. I'm just going to show you some of them here. This one is pretty similar to the one that TJ was showing you when he tied one up, but it's got a weight on the bottom, and that works for casting out longer distances or if it's a little windier, and it weights the bobber down a little bit. We have some of these tiny ones like this, very narrow, with just a small tip on them. And they're very sensitive. You use them for small panfish. Very sensitive. You hardly need any bite on there at all to see a strike. Some taller ones, a waggler style like this, it's in windier conditions. This whole large piece is under the water, and it's just the orange tip that shows up. So again, very sensitive and similar to what we're using today. Now, TJ mentioned using a jig on the bottom as opposed to a plain hook. I've got a couple little tips here. We just got a little 16th ounce jig tied on here. But if you notice, this is a little tip that can help improve your hooking of fish. Is if you notice here, the point of this hook is in line with where you tie your line on, straight in line. Now the way a walleye or a lot of panfish eat is they inhale the jig, and if you feel a strike there and pull it out, it just slides across the top of their mouth, and you pull the jig right out of their mouth without hooking them. So if you just take and bend this just a little bit off to the side, now when it's being pulled out of their mouth, it'll hook into the side. You can see that on your hand. You lay it on your hand and pull it across, and it's going to hook in there. So that's just a little tip. Just offset the hook a little bit so it isn't in line with the tie spot. Another option that I'm going to show you is how to tie a stop knot. Now, TJ showed you a rubber bobber stop, and they're handy, and sometimes they get caught up in the guides of your rod. Or if you happen to run out of them, this is a very simple knot to learn how to tie, and it works just as well. What I've got here is a piece of 10-inch Dacron line. And I'm going to make a loop with it, just a plain loop, and lay it across the top of my monofilament line above my bobber. I'll take one tag end and wrap it around 4 or 5 times through the loop and around the monofilament line. I'm holding both tag ends of the Dacron and pulling it tight. Before I tighten it right up, I'm going to wet it, snug the line up, and clip the ends off. Now you have a stop knot that you can slide up and down the line anywhere you want, and that'll hold onto the monofilament very well. You can set your bobber depth with that. Well, TJ, we've had a great day here at Lac Pelletier, fishing for walleye and perch. Caught some nice fish, and what a perfect end to the day. George has cooked us up a great meal of fish. We'd sure like to thank George and Ross and Curtis for all the help they've been, and I'm sure we're going to be back here again sometime soon.
You bet we are. Be sure to join us next time on Gone Fishing.